So he says, won't you haul, if you haul marijuana? That's the hottest thing out there. I don't know anything about it. I've heard the kids smoking it. I said, what would he pay? And he said, I think they would pay $10,000 for a trip down there. And I said, I'm all for it. I said, what would they do if they catch you? He said, nothing. Probation. He said, that thing's almost legal out here in California. So he introduced me to a fellow. Said, you got an airplane? You'd fly down there? I said, yeah, I'm going down there fishing all the time anyway. They don't ever bother me.
Where were you going fishing?
In Mexico.
Were you really?
Yeah, I'd fly down there on some of my days off, Murray and I, and take the children down there, the baby, and so we just had a nice life there. We weren't far from Mexico and in Southern California.
Right.
So I went down there and did a load. And, man, I come back, and they give me $10,000 in a paper bag. That was 2 years' pay on the fire department. Take home. And I shook it on the bed, and Mari put her hand up over her mouth and said, oh, my, I don't believe it. And the baby grabbed the $100 bills and crawling around, and we just laughed. We didn't owe any money. We didn't do nothing. So we went out to dinner and then put it in a lockbox.
So what was that like the first time you actually flew down to Mexico to pick up marijuana? I mean,
it was just picturesque. It really was.
What kind of people did you meet with, and was it what you expected? Was it shady at all?
Not at all. I went to a place called Jalapa, Veracruz. It's the capital of the state of Veracruz. It's up in the mountains. And it was like Bible times. The people had like stone basins in the street, and they were scrubbing their clothes, the women were. And I went to church, a Catholic church, and I walked around, and there was the Stations of the Cross. I'd never seen those carved, all the Stations of the Cross in a Catholic church. I understand now that they have to protect them because they're such valuable art pieces. And I was impressed with that. And then I went out early in the morning to the airport to load the marijuana, and I had my fireman's badge in my wallet, and so the old guard on duty, he was kind of suspicious of it, and I showed him my fireman's badge, and he was all helpful.
Really?
So then I taxied down to the end of the runway, and they met me with a van and put the stuff in, and I was coming back across and didn't have enough fuel. I knew I wouldn't. I'd have to land somewhere, so I landed at a little abandoned strip with a little stone house at the end of it, and the man that owned the marijuana got in with me. So I put him out there, and there was a little boy herding goats, and his name was Lazarus. So we put the marijuana in the stone house, and I flew into, I forgot, one of the cities of Mexico, and refueled and came back out and sat there and had lunch with the little boy, then paid it back in there and flew on home.
Were you worried? Were you nervous at all?
Not a bit.
And you were flying, and you flew down there alone?
Yes, but the man that owned the marijuana flew back with me.
Okay.
So we didn't have any trouble a bit.
And then at what point did he pay you? When you landed back in the U.S.?
Yes, they came the next day and paid. And then the next load, they cheated me out of it. That was all they had, so the second load, they didn't have to pay me.
Really?
Yeah. So I took it, I found him, and I had to send a detective after him. We found him in New York, and I went up there and stuck a gun in his ribs and took him down to the wharf.
What?
And he was so nervous, he couldn't even light a cigarette. He thought I was going to kill him. Of course, I won't hurt him at all, but I was going to scare him into paying him my money. So I took his dog.
Wow.
And his dog was named Leslie, a beautiful, long-haired setter. And he was so upset about taking his dog. He said, take my wife, take my wife. I said, no, that's illegal. I'll take your dog. So I dog napped, and I kept the dog, and the children put bows in her hair.
Because this guy didn't pay you for the second trip.
Right. So anyhow, he never did pay me. So he caused so much heat till our friend out there said, give him his dog back, Roger. You're going to bring us all down.
So how did you find it? You hired a private investigator to like hunt him down or something?
He went up to a cabin where Bill, this guy's name was Bill, and where he lived, and in the fireplace was some burnt papers, and he looked at it, and there was where the dog was shipped to Vancouver, Canada, and from there transshipped back to New York.
Oh,
so
my God.
he copied the numbers and all down before he touched it, and it's disintegrated, and he found out the address where Bill was.
Wow.
He wasn't really a private detective, but he was better than private detective. He was the guy that first introduced me to these people.
Oh, he was the guy who introduced you.
Right.
Okay,
And
wow.
we went riding across country.
Right. So then what happened? Did you have an itch to keep doing this stuff, or?
Oh yeah, without that. Well, this is just easy. I went to see a
And
lawyer.
you had absolutely zero fear of being caught or getting in any kind of trouble.
No, well, of course I flew just at the treetop level, sagebrush would sometimes be in my wheel wells, and I was afraid of hitting a power line at night or something, more so than I was of getting caught.
What was the reason for flying so low?
Keep off a radar. They had radar on the hills around there, and so they were trying to catch people. They catch pilots every once in a while.
Oh, okay. What year was this?
1973.
73. Wow.
So I went to the lawyer and I said, "Lawyer, what'll happen if I get caught with a load of marijuana bringing in?" He says, "You work on the fire department?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You ever been convicted?" I said, "Never had a traffic ticket in my life. Never a moving violation." He said, "You'll get probation. At the most, you get a year and serve 4 months raking leaves on a military base." Oh, I kind of like that story. So I went and bought me a bigger airplane, a Cessna 207. That thing would carry 1,100 pounds, and I could make $40,000 in a day.
How much was that plane?
$35,000.
Cessna 207.
Right.
Wow.
It's a stretch 206, but it's the same engine. It's nice, 150 mile an hour, carries 1,100 pounds and go 1,000 miles. So great big old tires. So I started hauling. So I bought me a new Cadillac. I didn't know about all this, about making people look at you. And I had my mother and my baby sister come out from Georgia, and I took them to Disneyland in my new Cadillac. And Mother said, "What are you doing, boy?" I said, "I'm hauling pot, Ma." She says, "How much you making?" I said, "I'm making $40,000 any day I want to go down there." He said, "What do they do if they catch you?" So I told her about what the lawyer said, about 4 months at the most. I said, "What do you think, Ma?" She said, "Do you need a co-pilot, son?"
Wow.
My mother was a sport.
That's amazing. So did you ever bring a co-pilot with you, or did you always fly solo?
No, I always flew alone, yeah.
Okay. And at this point, you're how old?
30.
30 years old, flying down to Mexico every day, making $40,000.
Yeah, we got where to do about once a week, and then you had 6 months or something. There was no pot.
Okay.
So you had to work while it was
Are you
going.
still dealing with the guy who you had to hunt down and steal his dog?
I just got in touch with him a few weeks ago. He got in touch with me on Facebook.
I mean, at this point, when you're routinely flying to Mexico and back, are you still dealing with the same guy? Or?
No, we separated a little bit ways.
Okay.
Yeah, but no hard feelings. I think that he just didn't want to get very involved in it.
Mm-hmm. So you found somebody else you could do business with?
No, I didn't have anybody. I just did it myself.
So what did you do? You just flew down to the same location and said, "Hey, who's got pot?"
Oh, he had it. This guy Joaquin is there's a little river come there just north of Mazatlan in the state of Sinaloa, and it came through a cliff in the rivers and had like a waterfall. And then there was a poor village called Pichilingue. Starving donkeys, looked like starving people. And on the bend of the river in the sand was a 900-foot runway, if you could call it a runway, rutted.
Yeah.
It's real short, but the Cessna 207 would make it. So, but it wouldn't take off with a load. So this young
because
fella,
the runway was too short, the plane's too heavy, you need longer.
You're right. So I would take enough fuel down with me, and Mari and I would go to the grocery store and get little goodies and apples and toys for the children. And I'd pass out the boxes of those, and they just loved them. So every day more and more children were showing up on that runway. They had heard of the American Santa Claus that was coming.
The American Santa Claus.